Hello everyone. I want to thank you all for coming to the latest in our LabChart Mastery Series webinars. Today we're going to be talking about data visualization or visually navigating LabChart and exporting images. So what we're going to talk about today essentially is how we look at LabChart, how we change axes, how we change the way LabChart works, and how we make it work for us during our recording or during our analysis. So that's a little bit about the topic we're going to get into today. So I hope you all get a lot out of this, and we'll talk more about how the webinar is going to work here in a second. So the first thing I want to mention is that the audio from the attendees will be muted during the presentation. That means I won't be able to hear any of you. So if you have questions, type them into the questions area you have on your toolbar there. So just type those in there. We'll get to those at the end of the presentation, and we'll answer as many of them as we can. So just type those in there, and we'll get to those when we can. Before we get into the actual presentation, I want to talk about some of the other training options we have coming up. We have a lot of courses coming up, so if you, and space is limited, so if you have interest in attending one of our training courses, please be sure to sign up soon. We have LabChart courses in Boston, San Francisco, and Colorado Springs, and we have a new course coming up in December in Colorado Springs, and that's our advanced LabChart training. That's going to be covering our most advanced features exclusively throughout the day, and that's going to be covering macros and arithmetic and those advanced features that really allow you to get the most out of LabChart. So we'll go through everything in levels 1, 2, and 3, and those macros and the arithmetic features on a limited basis in levels 1, 2, and 3. And advanced LabChart training level 4 is going to be really digging into those features and showing you how to use those to your advantage. So if you enjoy our webinar series and you are interested in learning more about our software, I encourage you to look these courses up on 80instruments.com/events and find one that suits you for your schedule, and come join us for a 2-day hands-on course, and we'll really get you to be able to dig into the software and learn as much as you can about it and how it applies to your research. So look for those on the events page. The only webinar we have scheduled now for our LabChart Mastery Series is calibrating data, units conversion, and multi-point calibration. So we'll look for that on the 7th of November. And of course, we'll be updating these continuously as we schedule more webinars. So look at those at 80instruments.com/events as well. Before we get started in talking about the main part of the webinar today, I just want to go through a statement of intended use here. 80 Instruments products are not intended to be used as medical devices or in medical environments. That is to say that 80 Instruments research or products are intended for research and education only and are not intended to monitor, diagnose, or treat human subject. That being said, all of our equipment, or some of our equipment, the front ends are certified for human connection, either body protection or cardiac protection, depending on the amplifier you're using. So when used with the right front ends, we do have research-grade approval for connection to humans. All of our equipment is manufactured under quality management system ISO 9001 and is accredited by a certification body. So to get into the actual meat of the webinar here, this is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking a lot about the chart view. The chart view is your main area for recording, the view you most use in LabChart. And we're going to talk about how you modify that and change it and change the way things look. So we'll talk about that quite a bit. The other thing that we'll talk about here is selecting data, the different ways you can select data. And the reason we're going to talk about selecting data is because selecting data leads us into naturally creating images and exporting those images to other pieces of software. Now, the other things that are going to be mixed in here, this is a very generic overview, but the other things that are going to be mixed in here are the way that LabChart is laid out. We're going to use a feature called layouts to determine how LabChart is seen and how we use it. We're also going to change quite a few features in just the way that LabChart is presenting data to us. So we're going to look at all those together. And again, if you have questions, type those into the questions area, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. So Excuse me a moment while I switch over to LabChart here. What you should see come up here is LabChart with some data I just recorded a moment ago. And we're going to talk about how to view this a little bit differently and see different aspects of it using some of the tools you have available in the chart view and LabChart. So the first thing I want to talk about is the y-axis. The y-axis, of course, is labeled over here on the left in our main channel, and we have two other calculated pieces of data. What I'm going to do here is I just want you to notice that you have the option to zoom in and zoom out. You have the plus and minus buttons on each of your channels. So you can zoom out clicking the minus button. You can zoom in using the plus button here in channel 2. Okay, so that's a very easy way for you to change the way the axis is represented and how you see the y-axis. The next way you can actually do this is using your mouse to directly manipulate the axes that you're seeing. So if I hover my cursor over the numbers on the y-axis here, I want you to notice that my cursor has another small cursor show up next to it. This one is a double arrow, and what that means is I can then click and drag everything up and down on the y-axis. So I'm dragging the whole y-axis up and down when I see that double arrow. The other thing you'll notice is if I move my cursor up and down, that cursor changes. It's not always a double arrow. Sometimes I have what I like to call a rewind button. You see that's shown here. It's just a bar with two triangles, and then you get the same thing in the other direction here, the fast forward button. And what that does is it locks one axis. In this case, it locks the axis toward the bar in that cursor. So in this case, this image that you're seeing right here, the top axis will be locked, and if I click and drag, it'll only move the bottom axis. And I can do the same thing here on the top. If that bar is shown, that bar is locking the bottom axis, I can click and drag the top axis, and I can expand the top axis and zoom in that way. Okay, so there's quite a few things I can do here in terms of changing the way the axis is shown. I can do it manually. I can also use the plus and minus buttons as I showed you before. Another option for the scaling and some other channel menu features. We'll talk about some of the other channel menu features in a minute, but some of the options for this channel are also shown here in this menu called Channel Options. And if I click on that button, you'll see a lot of the options are shown here. Now, a few of these options are very straightforward. The first one you'll notice here is the auto scale button. The auto scale button will match the data that I have shown in the chart view with the top and bottom of my y-axis. And what that means essentially is it's going to take the maximum point and the minimum point and have that fill about 70% of the space available in the chart view. So I can auto scale that and match that area. So if I'm zoomed out, click here, click auto scale, that'll auto scale that channel. The other thing that I can do is I can actually auto scale all channels. So if I zoom out on some of these and make it so they're a little bit difficult to see, if I want to auto scale all channels, I'm going to hover my cursor over this button here, and that's this double green arrow. If I click on the double green arrow, it will expand everything so that the y-axis is fit by the data. That means, again, the top and bottom fill about 70% of the screen, or 70% of the area in that channel, and we can see what that does for us here. It zooms in on all of our data. We can see that very clearly. The other things you'll notice here in this menu, if I click on it again, we have an option for unipolar, and I'll click on these and so you can see what they do, but unipolar is going to match the entire range of the recorded data. Okay, so what that means is I'm recording right now plus or minus 100 millivolts, but a unipolar will only take the the top part of that area. So if I click on unipolar, showing me 0 to 100 rather than 100 to negative 100. If I click on bipolar, it shows me the entire range that I've recorded. So I'm recording right now between plus or minus 100 millivolts, and it's showing me that whole area. Other options that I have here are to invert scale and data. that's going to do exactly what it sounds like. It's going to flip my image, or it's going to flip the data that I'm seeing upside down. Now the axes are also flipped. That means the scale still says negative 50 to 50 on the bottom of this data here, but it's essentially inverted both the scale and the data. So keep that in mind, that when you click that button, the scale is inverted as well. It doesn't change the numbers that you get from the data. It simply changes the way it's displayed. Another option you have here is to set scale. Set scale will allow you to manually set the scale. So I can set the scale, right now it's 0 or negative 100 to 100. I can manually set the scale 50, negative 10, and there I've set my scale manually. Okay, pretty straightforward, and some nice features that allow you to really customize how things look. So that's the options we have here. Outside of a couple others I'm going to talk about later, I'm going to talk about guidelines here in a minute. The other option you have here is include in auto scale all channels. So what does that mean for us? That means if this is checked by default in all of my channels. So if I click this button here, what that will allow me to do is leave this one how it's shown when I click auto scale all channels. That means that that one will not be auto scaled, the rest of them will be. Okay, so keep that in mind. You can use that if you want one not to change, or you want one of your channels to not change when you're doing your auto scale. You can click that button and have that happen that way. Another option we have, and we talked about auto scale all channels, which is a great feature. If you have anything coming off the screen, you can click auto scale. That'll let everything match the data in the window. Another option we have here is the ability to continuously auto scale the data. And what that means is I can click on this button here next to the auto scale all channels button, and that is continuous auto scale. So what continuous auto scale does for us, as I said, is make sure that our data is always in the correct scale. If I move things around here, you know, I should actually record a little bit more data for us to be able to do this well. But if I click on this button, continuous auto scale, what this will do is it'll make it so no matter where I'm at, you see the axes are adjusting. If I scroll along, the axes automatically adjust. So it makes it so that my data is always fitting inside the window that I'm currently looking at. What this also means is during live recording, if I click Start, and I'm recording new data, and of course I didn't put my pulse transducer on very tightly, so I'm not getting very good data here. Let me try that again. Well, so I'm not going to get very good data here. That's okay. Regardless, so there we go. There we go. It's getting some better data. So regardless, what you're seeing here is that as we scroll along and we get new data, what you should be seeing is that our axis is continuously adjusting so that everything matches the screen, and you can see everything well continuously throughout the experiment. And you no longer have to, you know, see your data go off the screen, come over here and click any buttons. It'll automatically adjust them for you, which is a really nice feature to be able to have. So some of the other options we have here, that's really all the y-axis options that we wanted to talk about. So some of the other options we have here are to change sort of some things about the x-axis. So what we're going to do right now is talk about, you know, some of the other chart view options. Namely, we're going to talk about the x-axis compression we have here. So what you'll notice at the bottom, on the bottom right-hand side here, we have expand horizontal scaling, compress horizontal scaling. These are the two buttons we have. If I hover my cursor over here, you can see which is which. Expand is on the right, and compress is on the left. And I can compress my horizontal scaling and expand my horizontal scaling as I see fit. And you can see because I have the continuous auto scale on, it'll automatically adjust what we see. What that does allow me to see more or less of my data. Another thing that we have here on so that's the x-axis compression. Another option we have here is, sorry, I'm putting on my pulse transducer here. Another option we have here is a feature that allows us to pause the scrolling in our screen. So if I click on this pause button here, what that does, while I'm recording, what that does for me is it pauses the screen. So now what you should notice is up here it says recording data. So it is currently recording data. And you can see my scroll bar is moving down here on the bottom. And it's moving because I have new data coming in. However, I'm not seeing that new data coming in because I'm allowing myself to just review everything. And I did that by clicking the toggle scroll while sampling on/off button here. If I click it again, you can see it goes back to live, and you can see the data continuously coming in. Some other options we have here in the chart view, of course, are the ability to compress or expand the vertical axes of these channels. And so what that means for us is if I really want to focus on one of these channels, I can simply just zoom in on this channel 1 and make channel 2 and 3 smaller and look at them a little bit differently. So keep that in mind. You can change the way that looks. And of course, if you want to, what you can do here is you can right-click in the channel and you can go back to equalize channel heights to match the channel heights back together. Another option we have, just like expanding the axis here on the different channels, I also have the ability to use the split view. The split view can open in a couple of ways. One way is to right-click and choose split view. Okay, that'll open up the split view. The other way is to just simply go over here to the left side of the screen, left side of the chart view, hover your cursor over the bar that's on the left, and click and drag that bar out. And what that gives you is two screens. You have one screen right now that is live recorded data. The other one, I'm free to review old data. And of course, I can also use the toggle scroll while sampling button to make both views live. Now both are scrolling, and I can see my data scrolling in a larger view on the right side, and I can see it in a smaller view on the left side if that's what I'd like to do. So the split view allows us to see trends versus, live data. It also allows us to see, various different aspects that you might want to see in two different views. So that's a really nice feature to have, the ability to see your data in two different ways. Another option we have here that I want to show you is on the chart view, the ability to simply click and hold on your recorded data. Now, you can also do this on calculations. And I'm left clicking right now, which is a normal click. I'm left clicking and I'm holding, and what it's showing me is all the settings that were used to record that data. So you can see the type of power lab I used, you can see the sampling rate, you can see the range, you can see all those different things. If I do this on a calculated channel, you can see what the calculated channel or the calculated data came from. So a lot of options here that allow you to see how your data is recorded. And it's one of those features that's really useful, if you have some problems with, maybe the way your data is being recorded or something like that. You're looking at an old data file that might have some issues. You can come in here, you can click on this, and you can see, make sure that everything is recorded properly. Another option we have, of course, I've shown you a couple of these already, but if I right-click in the channels, I have a couple of options here. First one is, we already talked about equalize channel heights. We can auto-scale the data, of course. We can add a comment. We can set the marker. The marker is something I'll talk about here in a minute. Show points as dots, changes the way things are looking. But the important one here is really the guidelines. If I click on the guidelines, I'm going to do this in channel 2. I think is where probably are most useful. What this allows me to do is set a guideline to use as either a target or an indicator that I've reached a certain level that I might be interested in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a guideline here in channel 2 at 62 millivolts. And this channel down here on channel 2 is Actually, let's do this. Let's go to do this on channel 3. This will make more sense, hopefully. I'm going to do this on channel 3. I'm going to click Guidelines, turn on my first guideline, and I'm going to set a threshold. Let's put it at 70 beats per minute. The other thing that we can do is we can shade above or shade below that line. We can change the colors of the shading. And what this gives us the ability to do is really, like I said, a visual indicator of what's going on in the channel. So if I scroll back to another area here, you can see that in this area we had a lower heart rate, and you can see we're below that line. Here in a different area, we're also below that line. You can see as we're going above or below it. And lastly, what it gives you the ability to do is during recording, you can also see, when you're crossing that indicated threshold. So as I start recording new data here in my channel, what we should see is I'm only dipping below that line a little bit, of course, because I'm talking quite a bit, but we can see my data going above and below that line. Another great indicator of this is to use the DVM and use the DVM color to indicate where we are. So you can see the DVM here is turning red or green depending on where my data is. So that's a nice feature of the guidelines, is that it changes colors while I'm recording data. So to get the DVMs, I did that pretty quickly. If you want to get the DVM out here, the easiest way to do that is to just hover over the data. You can see here, hopefully it changes when I hover my cursor over it, of course, so it's going to be hard to see if I just hover my cursor over it. But you can see just to the right above the channel name, it shows me where my cursor is, what the current data is. If I go to that number here, right now it says input off because I'm hovering over it, but you can see where it says it shows the data there. If I click on that and drag it out, or if I'm recording data, it's actually easier, because if I'm recording data, I don't have my pulse transistor on anymore, but if I'm recording data, it shows that number. If I click on that number and I pull it out, that's how I get those DVMs, okay? So here's my DVM, and I can do that with each channel. I can do that with every channel. And I can do that with the time. The time is here on the top right. Pull the time out, I can do that as well. And the DVM for the channels have some other options. If I click on the little slider button here, you can see that shown. I get some options, and my options are to do some calculations. By default, if you look at the DVM, what it's doing is it's showing me the current number for that channel, updated every time, as fast as it can update, I guess. But if I click on the slider, it gives me an option to do, say, an average, and I can do the average over the last 10 seconds, and I can also do a graph. I can graph the last 60 seconds. Or let's do something shorter because I don't know if I have that much data in here. Let's do 30 seconds. And again, what this gives me the ability to do, and I don't have 30 seconds of data here at the end, so it's having an issue with that. But what it does is, as I record new data, I'll start to record some data here so that you can see how this works. That DVM will only update every 10 seconds because that's what I told it to do, and it will plot the last 30 seconds of data. So as my calculations start to show up here, and I get 10 seconds of data, there's my 10-second average. And I also have one data point here, but it'll probably take another 10 seconds or so before I get another data point, and you can start to see the plot showing up. But that's really how it works. So you see there's my plot now showing up, trending plot, and I also have a 10-second average of the data, which is a nice feature. Another thing we have here in the chart view is the ability to right-click on the time axis. Right-clicking on the time axis will do a couple things for you. Of course, you can open up the split view, as we've done before. You can also add a comment. The other thing you can do here is you can change the time mode. You can change the time showing from the start of the block, showing from the start of the file, time of day. You can use the coordinated universal time here. You can change the time format just by right-clicking here on the time axis. Okay. Another thing that you can do with the chart view here is you can automatically scroll the chart view after you're done recording data. And so what I mean by that is, one of the ways you can review data, of course, is to click and drag, and you can look for something using the scroll bar. One of the other ways is to automatically do it. If I hold Control, I can click on my channel, and I can move it around manually. So I'm holding Control, I'm clicking, and then I can move it around manually. The other thing that I can do, and hopefully you guys can see this through the web interface here, if I click and drag and let it go, it will automatically scroll for me. So it'll scroll at the speed at which I drag it across the screen, and I can see that scroll across, and I can look. It's an easy way for me to review all my data. One more thing you have here in the chart view is the marker. The marker is a great feature if you want to get a quick and easy indicator of what's happening in your data or changes that are occurring in your data. If I click on the marker again is down here in the bottom left part of the screen. If I click on the marker and I click and I drag it out and I put it in some place, what you're going to notice is, and this will be helpful if I change my DBM back to a normal DBM, what you're going to notice is the DBM changed. The DBM changed from just showing the absolute value where my cursor is to showing a delta. Now it says delta 5, delta 10, delta 24. So it's showing the difference between where the marker is and where my cursor currently resides. So this is a really, really easy way for you to see what's the difference between this point and some point afterward. Okay, so it's a very, very nice feature for you to quickly assess, what's occurring with your data. And of course, you can use this while you're recording data live. If you're recording live data, you can also put this into the chart view, and now it's going to show a delta on everything. Okay. One of the cool things about the marker is if you lose your marker, meaning it's no longer on the screen, and you want to get it back, you can just double click where the marker used to be down here, or just single click, and it will show up. It'll come back. And then you can place it in your data and you can do another assessment. So some of the rest of the features, those are the chart view features that really allow you to, sort of change the axes and change the way you're recording data or viewing data. Some of these other options now are more global in LabChart in terms of how it's used. The first one I'm going to talk to you about is I'm opening the datapad here, but I'm not going to talk about the datapad. What I'm going to talk about is the toolbars and layout features. So if you look, the toolbar is this bar up here that has it's my button bar that has all of my various options on this, okay? It has all of my buttons for the datapad. It has all my buttons from command. It has some options from window that I can just click on these. It gives me easy access to some of these features. What the layout does, layout's a little bit different. What layout does for me is layout allows me to change the way that the different windows are laid out in LabChart. So, one of the things you'll notice is, if you use LabChart a lot, sometimes you spend an amount of time you don't want to spend moving around the windows as I'm doing now and putting them in place. One of the things that the layout can do for you is do that sort of thing automatically. So what I can do is just simply click on Smart Tile here. And what Smart Tile is going to do is it's going to take my approximate view that I've put together here with my zoom view down below, my datapad here, and I can click on the Smart Tile, and that's just going to make everything kind of nice and neat. Okay, it's going to take approximately what I've tried to put together, and it's going to make everything nice and neat just by clicking that button. Another thing we have here is Tile Mini Windows. What Tile Mini Windows does, Mini Windows is referring to, it's another name for these DVMs that are out here. Tile Mini Windows is going to get those out of our way and put those in a place that they're kind of off the screen a little bit and sort of out of the way. They're still there, they're still functional, but they simply aren't in the way anymore. And one of the things that, again, if you're using an older version of LabChart, or if you've, you use LabChart a lot, one of the things you may notice is, one of the things that's time-consuming is simply moving things around. If you opened up some different views like I've done here, and then you want to go back to the original view, then you got to close everything, maximize this, maybe move the mini windows around. One of the options that Layout gives you is it gives you the ability to save the way things are laid out. So if I get everything just the way I want it, with my channel heights, my compression, everything is the way I want it, I can come here and I can say New Layout. And what that's going to do for me is it's going to save. I'm going to give it number 1. And you can see I already have some layouts saved here from previous use on this machine. But I'm going to save this as number 1. This is my best layout, will be my button tooltip. I'm going to save everything about this. So what does that do for me? What that does is if I change my layout in any way, say I want to look at channel 2 for a minute, I've closed the data pad, I've opened this up, and I opened up, say, the spectrum view. And then after doing all this and looking at what I wanted to look at, perhaps I want to go back to what I was originally looking at. If I click on my button, and I can hover over this right now, and you can see that it says Best Layout. I can click on that button, and it's going to simply go back to my original view. Everything I had open is going to open. It's going to go back to exactly the way it was. Okay, this is really nice, and it's a really time-saving feature, or a really large time-saving feature if you use LabChart a lot, especially for doing data analysis and things like that. You may open a bunch of windows, and it can sort of get a little overwhelming if you are not closing all of them. You can always reset to original view that you like to see of the data. You can see I have some others saved on here. We can see what those look like. So there's my recording, one that I saved earlier that has the spectrum view, and it has the chart view over here, and then I have the analysis view that I was using another time, and I can see that I have chart view next to the data pad that I was using for analysis. And then I have this view that I just saved earlier, just a second ago. So Layout can save everything about the way you're seeing data. One of the next things that I want to talk to you about, though, is now we've talked about sort of the visual features in LabChart here. One of the other things that we're going to be talking about is exporting images. Before we can export images, though, we need to be able to select the area that we want to create an image of. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to show you the different ways to select data. The first way is the most obvious way. If you click and drag in the channel, you can select data. Okay, so I just clicked and dragged manually in one channel, selected that data. Wonderful. That's the easiest thing to do. The next option is, that's what I've just shown you is the easiest way to do it, but it's probably the least precise, meaning that you're not being very precise, or you're not being very discriminative of how you are making that selection. What I can do, though, is I can be very precise both about the x-axis and about the y-axis. And let me show you how to do that. So first, with the y-axis, if I hold Alt and then make a selection, what's going to happen is it's going to select everything from the top to the bottom in that channel on the y-axis. So you can be very precise about what you're selecting if you're creating an image. If you do this option, hold Alt, make a selection, and if you set the scale to a particular scale, so you want to compare this data to other data, I can put this at 60 and the bottom one at -20. Be very precise, hold Alt, select everything from top to bottom. That means my image is going to show everything from -20 to 60, and I know exactly what I'm going to be creating, and that's that area. The next option is to hold Shift. If we hold Shift, you can select the same x-axis or the same time axis in another channel. So again, if I make a selection here in this channel, I hold Shift, select. You can see that I'm selecting the same area in channel 2. Another thing that I can do is I can hold Alt, make a selection. I can also hold Shift Alt and select the second channel with the same time axis and the same y-axis. The whole y-axis, I mean, not the same y-axis, but the entire y-axis. So Shift Alt does that for me. So Alt, select the whole y-axis. Shift Alt will select the same x-axis and the same and the entire y-axis in the new channel. Okay. So my final option here, if after selecting more than one channel, I can select all the channels. And I can do that by simply clicking and dragging here in the time axis. I hover my cursor over the time axis, click drag, and I can select all the channels. And last but not least, I can deselect a channel by holding Shift and clicking in that channel, and that will deselect that channel. Of course, now that I have a selection made, I can create an image. But I want to show you one more way to select data first. The last way to select data is to come into Commands and Set Selection. Set Selection, again, allows me another way to be very precise about what my selection is. You can see the Set Selection window shows me the exact time that's selected. It also shows me which channels are selected. So I can come in here and I can say, you know, I also want channel 2, or I don't want channel 2. I can select, okay, so this is from 1 minute 40 seconds to 1 minute 42 seconds. What I can do is be very precise about this as well. I come in here and say I actually want exactly 140 to exactly 142. And it's going to be it may be a little bit off of that. I may add a millisecond here or there depending on where my samples are. But I can be very precise about exactly what time I'm selecting. I can display this as seconds if I want to, so from 100 to 102. And then I can also set active point instead of setting a selection. The active point is just a cursor. So you can see I have this one line here in channel 2, or channel 1 and channel 3 that's showing it's an active point. I'm going to go back to my selection. The last thing that I can do here in set selection is I can be very precise about the time that I'm selecting in future selections. If I lock this time, this amount of time, in my duration area, I can then click and drag this 2-second window around and I can select any type of 2-second window that I want to. And if I go and find somewhere else and I click in a different area, it'll again make a 2-second selection. Okay? So I can be very precise about how that works. So the last thing that I'm going to do here now is show you how to create an image out of this. If I make a selection either precisely using set selection or imprecisely just manually making a selection as I've done here, I can come now to my window area, my toolbar, and I'm going to select the zoom view. And again, what the zoom view allows me to do is it opens up a big window here. This window is what we call the zoom view or the zoom window. And that's showing me the data that I've selected in the zoom view. By default, it shows it to me overlaid. And of course, I can click another button here. this is the two options that change whether I'm in overlay mode or I'm in stack mode. And I can click this button here, and I can put them in stack mode rather than overlay mode and see them in separate graphs, or I can click the overlay mode again and see the two channels overlaid. So those are my options. You also have the marker still. You can use the marker just like you would in the chart view. As I'm hovering my cursor over this, you'll notice that there's a time and channel 1 display shown here at the top. Hopefully, near my cursor right now, you can see the channel 1 display, the number where my cursor is. If I want to see channel 3 instead, which is what I've got down here, I can click on this button here, and now channel 3 is the active channel, and you can see it's showing the number from channel 3 instead of from channel 1. Another thing I can do here with the zoom view is I can actually zoom in on my data further. I can click and drag here, and I can look at just that area. And if I want to go back, of course, I have some undo buttons here that allow me to undo that change in the zoom view and go back to my original option. Now, one of the cool things about the zoom view is that I can now copy and paste this image into, sorry, I'm trying to open a new PowerPoint feature here. I can copy and paste that image into a PowerPoint. So if I go back to LabChart here and I go to Edit, I can choose Copy Zoom View. I go back to my new PowerPoint presentation. If I paste this image just by Control V, or I can right click and go to Paste, there's my image. Now, my image is quite large as it pasted in here, and the reason it's large is because the original image is large. If you want that image to be smaller, you simply need to make the zoom view smaller, and it'll paste in a smaller image when you paste it into PowerPoint. So I can make it smaller, and I can put a smaller image in there. But that's okay. I'm just going to go back to my PowerPoint option here. I am going to manually make my image smaller. And I'm going to make it small enough so I can see it. But what you'll notice is because I started with a big image and now I have a small image, you can see how small my text is. One of the cool things about the way that LabChart handles these images is that it pastes the images as what's called a Windows object. That means that I can right-click on these images, I can go to Group, and I can ungroup the image. And I got to do it twice to get it fully through this process. But when I do that, what you'll notice here is all of the little elements in my image have been disassembled, and they are now separate pieces. And so what I can do is I can select things and change the font size, for instance. Okay, so there's my font size changes. It's too large, of course. But you get the idea. I can also select every individual piece like of this, the trace, the outward edge. I can select the individual graticules here. I can delete, move, change, modify this however I see fit for the presentation or the purposes that I'm using them for. So that's a great, great feature that we have. Give you the ability to do really anything you want in terms of making presentations, and you have a large capacity to do so using LabChart and the zoom view. So that is what I wanted to talk to you about during our presentation today. So I hope that you guys got a lot out of it and seeing how you can change LabChart and really utilize a lot of these features for your purposes of changing the way LabChart is utilized and visualized and seen. And I hope that you guys got some of your questions answered. So that is the end of the webinar today. If you have any questions, I don't think we have any questions just yet, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to type them into the questions area, and I'll hang around for a few minutes and let you guys type those in if you have some. Otherwise, I'd like to thank you for coming, and we'll see you next time.